All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our interview. We're here with Tanya Walter. She is a Canadian Team Canada football player, and we're just going to ask a couple of questions. Welcome, Tanya.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk about basically females in sports, females in football, and everything around that.
Awesome. Well, we're excited too. So my very first question to you is, I just want to know your story, and I want to share your story. I've heard it personally, and I think it's amazing, and I just want everybody else to hear it. So let's, from the beginning to the end, how did you get where you are?
So I grew up in a really small town. I lived on a farm for the entirety of my life until I moved to the city for university. So I was always a very active kid. I was out helping on the farm, chasing cows, playing outside. So physical activity was always something that I was very much drawn to. Once I hit school, kindergarten, grade one, my parents put me right into dance, as well as actually figure skating for a couple of years. But I stayed consistent with dance. Really, that's kind of at that age, one of the first sports that you get exposure to. There's not a lot of organized sport for like football, basketball, all of things like that at that age. So started out dancing, danced all the way through till grade 11. But once I hit junior high, I did start to jump into actual team sports. So I played basketball, volleyball, any opportunity I had to play a sport, a little bit of soccer, track and field. Again, being in a small town, kind of one of the positives was that if you wanted to play a sport, generally the opportunity was there. There wasn't a high level of competition. There wasn't really a lot of teams that were making cuts. So if you wanted to play, you could play. So I fell in love really with basketball in junior high. That was my go-to sport. So I played basketball throughout junior high and high school. That was actually why I quit dance in my grade 12 year, was to put a little bit more focus on basketball. It was great, had a lot of great experiences in high school sports, but I did notice like my last couple of years when I was looking to that like what's next piece, was just like minimal amounts of opportunity. To get invited to ID camps, you need to have exposure, and a lot of the tournaments that our small school would go to, we didn't have scouts and recruits coming out. So I noticed very early on, like being in a small town did equate to a little bit lesser of an opportunity than maybe if you were living in a big city. So I had the opportunity to go out to an ID camp. I just wasn't uh, I wasn't where I needed to be to go to the next level, which was fine. So I ended up moving to Edmonton, going to university. And actually my first year of university at Grant Mac, I was actually on the dance team, which was a really neat opportunity. So I got to kind of pull my dance background, but also be part of something at essentially a university collegiate level. From there, I basically thought my athletic career was for the most part over. I played a lot of recreational sports, recreational basketball, but it never really felt like what I wanted. It just wasn't quite satisfying enough. It wasn't competitive. It wasn't at that level. And I really craved that competitive feeling. That was ultimately what got me into being a personal trainer at that time. So I switched schools, went back to school for being a personal trainer. And then 2012, I started that, and I'm still doing that to this day. It gave me that feeling of being involved in sports and physical activity. It just made the most sense for me to carry forward with that. About a year into being a personal trainer, I actually had a lady come into the gym who was training for Team Canada football ID camp. So at that time, I had no idea that women's football really existed. I had seen a couple like billboards about it, and I was like, okay, like it's probably just some recreational, like fun thing. And I just really wasn't into like doing something just purely for fun. I wanted to do something competitively. So I didn't think much of it. But when she told me that there was a Team Canada, I immediately in that moment decided that that is where I wanted to go. I was like, I know nothing about football. I don't really even watch it. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to make Team Canada for football. So that moment, I think like the next week I went out to practice. I definitely, going out for the first time, did feel a little bit out of place. I showed up in like my tank top and my pink shorts. And everyone else was kind of just in, not neon pink shorts and just regular workout attire. So I definitely did feel a little bit of a place in the beginning. But once we got outside and put the pads on, I realized that football really was a sport for me. I had always been told that I was too aggressive, I was too competitive, I was too loud, I was too like, it was just too everything for other sports. So it was really neat to finally find a sport that all of those seemingly negative characteristics at that time were actually huge positives. So like being, aggressive and strong was a huge thing in football. And that was really ultimately what got me to where I am now. And, having the confidence and having, all of those pieces to be a football player. And another big thing with football is really learning, like, it is an ultimate team sport. So I played on plenty of teams. I played on basketball teams. I played on volleyball teams. And like, yeah, it's a team, but any given player can be very successful and stand out. But the interesting thing with football is it doesn't matter how good you are. If you don't have quality around you, your team is going to struggle. It really is a direct showing of you are only as strong as your weakest link. So it doesn't matter how great of a quarterback you have. If your running back isn't great, you're going to struggle. So everyone really needs to be on the same page and everyone really needs to support each other. And that was really that figuring out that notion of football was really what got me to start to push things forward. I was like, well, if I want my team to be better and I want to have more opportunities, then I need to have better people beside me and more people beside me. So the Edmonton Storm was the team I started playing with. A couple of years into it, I visited the States a little bit to go to some camps, which was really, really great. And then I did start, considering coaching. Did some spring camps with some high schools, but really the next step in that football career was the Team Alberta. So went out to Team Alberta. We played in the tournament. We ended up winning we won bronze against New Brunswick. And that was really the first time that I had matched up, other than being in the States, but that I had matched up against players that were significantly better than me, that were really at my level and above. So that really drove me to focus on improvement and training in the off season and going forward. So it was a great first taste at Team Alberta. From there, I was selected to the All-Star list, which essentially we got the first invite to Team Canada ID Camp. Went to Team Canada ID Camp later that year. And after weeks and weeks of not knowing what was going on, when we were going to find out, finally got the email letting me know that I made Team Canada. In that moment, it was just like everything really came together. So that like day where I was like, I'm going to play on Team Canada, 6 years before that, finally all came together and I was like, wow, like I did it. And it was a huge confidence booster. It just really showed that, if you put in the hard work and like find your space, that you can be incredibly successful. So I ended up playing Team Canada that following year in 2017, where we ended up winning a silver medal against the States. We were actually the first Team Canada team to put up points against the US, which was really, really exciting. They still beat us, but they have a far larger pool of football to build from. And that again was just another notch of me like, okay, to move this forward and to create more opportunity, we need to be better. So kind of after that, I started looking at like, how can I help behind the scenes? Mm-hmm. I got invited in 2018 to the NFL Women's Career Forum. Mm-hmm. So that was a really big eye opener. I know a lot of women there were there to like get a job in the NFL, but I had this kind of like gut feeling that wasn't for me and that I wanted to see things grow where I was from. Mm-hmm. And where I was playing for the girls and women that I knew. So I came home, started to talk with Football Alberta a lot, got into more coaching, coached some flag football, and ultimately wanted to start a girls league, tackle football league. So a couple other provinces had it. I was like, there's no reason we shouldn't. So I moved forward with that, working side by side with the CDMFA, basically just as a volunteer. In 2019, we launched the first girls league. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing like 18 girls come out in pads to our first practice. And I was like, this is so exciting. I was so happy. Fast forward to 2020, when I actually started working for the CDMFA, we had like 80 girls in pads, which was just to put those two pictures side by side was a pretty magical thing. And just seeing how many girls and hearing how many girls that it completely changed their life. I mean, I know that it changed everything for me. It gave me a completely new career path that I never thought I would be in, really developing things and moving things forward and just changing the landscape of like women, girls, and females in football.
That's awesome. I have a question actually based on your story. You first of all, what age were you when you first started football? If you don't mind asking, I know I don't want to date you, but what age were you when you first started football?
I think it was 22, 21 or 22, 22. Yeah, 22 or 23, somewhere in there.
That's very cool that you started that sport so late in the game, so to speak, and were able to make Team Canada. That's actually really inspiring
Mhm.
for a lot of girls too. Meaning, just doesn't stop. There's other opportunity out there, so that's really really cool. And the second question: so why do you use three words, four words actually? Aggressive, loud, competitive, and strong. Um, why did you think those were words that people like associate as a negative thing when you were in other sports? Like, I'm just curious on your take on that.
Yeah, so I just found like in basketball, like I was a very aggressive player and like I had multiple times where like and like I'm sure there was times where like I was for sure being too aggressive. But like my role models when I was playing basketball growing up were male basketball players. So I embodied what I saw from them and like even with certain things like, saying things to the ref. You see it all the time in the NBA. There's constant conversations or like getting in people's faces and like, that little kind of fun banter, trash talk type thing. Like all of that. Like I remember very specifically like referees being very upset about that and like coaches, saying like, don't do that. And I was like, okay, like fine. But like I was only going and modeling myself after like the people that I was seeing. And I definitely did notice in high school, like the expectation for a female athlete versus a male athlete was quite different.
Mhm.
And I've even seen that in football as well. Like I've, done my fair share of trash talking, in a respectful way, but a fun way. And I've had refs literally tell me to shut up and act like a lady
Oh, wow.
on the football field.
Oh,
So, it's a very telling situation. And then that kind of was like brought me back to high school. And I was like, man, this is the exact same thing. But like, this isn't a me problem. This
mhm.
is a like, I see men and boys do this all the time and it's not frowned upon. But as soon as a female is passionate and loud, um, it's always like someone's always trying to like push you back down. And I think things have changed a little bit in that manner, but the fact that I've still experienced that in football shows that there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. So actually on that note, what are is there any like if you had to pick about three significant barriers or even two, um, what were they throughout your playing career? Any time within your playing career?
Um, so I think probably the biggest barrier was, I think one of them was like a confidence thing.
Mm,
I was really good at faking being confident, but like deep down inside, I always kind of felt like maybe I shouldn't be here. I'm a fraud. Like I wasn't good enough to play anything else at a university level. Like maybe I shouldn't be on Team Canada.
mhm,
And just kind of always second guessing myself. And it really didn't help that the support systems for females in sports, but support systems for females in football is even lower.
mhm,
The amount of times that I'd be like, oh yeah, I play tackle football, and people would be like, oh, like that's women shouldn't play tackle football,
mhm,
or like football is for men,
mhm,
or you should be like doing something else. You're too old, you're too pretty to play that sport. Like I've heard it all. And as much as you ignore it and like better deep down in your heart, it does become quite taxing to constantly have people tell you that you don't belong in a space.
mhm.
And I did notice that even more as I as I started transitioning into coaching and transitioning into, building and creating and developing the sport. Um, it's just like that people don't believe you belong in that space
Mhm.
and just like building that confidence. And that was like when I made Team Canada, I was like, okay, well, like I am someone, I felt like had something on my resume to be like, no, like I play women's football and I actually play for Team Canada.
Mhm.
And it shouldn't feel like I have to prove myself, but it's always constantly felt like I've had to prove myself in any situation.
Mhm.
Another barrier is really just like with our women's team, like we don't have a lot of financial support.
Mm.
And unfortunately, even doing fundraisers, like we're limited with what we are allowed to do through AGLC because we are adults and we should be able to pay for our own sport.
Mhm.
They're more than happy to offer all of the fundraising opportunities to youth, which is great and that's fine. but also like we can't build and grow without having some sort of support.
Mhm.
And I think too, because people are so unaware of the sport, not a lot of companies are willing to put money into it because they're not overly confident that they're going to be seen and get like a return on it.
Mhm.
Um, we pay to play. And if we want more, we have to pay more. So, there's really no break in that system. And it makes it really hard to recruit players
Mhm.
with that, because if a girl's coming out of high school and she's a great football player, but she's also a good rugby player and she has a scholarship for rugby, she's going to go play rugby.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of change some of that, I had a lot of barriers, and I just really would like to see a lot of those change so that it's an easier transition for girls to play tackle football.
For sure. So, what about your experiences? I guess you kind of talked about your experience as a female football player on the field and off the field. Do you have anything else to say? And I'm also really interested to see, like, personally, do you remember steps you took to kind of overcome those barriers as a football player, and kind of taught, like you said, you push through, you keep on going. How do you do that? Like, I know there might not be a magic potion, generally there's not. But if you had to think of something that you do consistently, what is that?
Um, a lot of it is kind of out of the need to prove people wrong. As much as sometimes it negatively affects your confidence to have people say like you don't belong here. On the flip side, if you can frame that in the proper manner, it's something that can really drive you forward.
Mhm.
So I know, like, a lot of the time, if I'm feeling uninspired, unmotivated, I'll just go to the local comment section on Facebook and see what everyone has to say. And I'm like, no, like John from Nebraska, I'm going to prove you wrong. Women do belong in football, which probably isn't, it doesn't seem like an ideal way to move yourself forward and to keep yourself motivated. But at times it's worked really well for me. Also, just like building a support system. So I'm lucky to have a husband who's in football, and most of my best friends I play with. So I've just chosen to surround myself with the people who are going to support me playing and who believe that I belong there and who believe that women should have more opportunity in sport. And really, anyone that doesn't believe any of that, I'm very quick to I don't need that negativity and that disbelief around. So I've been very specific on who I select to have in my life, that they need to be able to support and understand that. And I think that's, a lot of people just don't have that. And that's really what this program, I think, is able to offer people, that something that I didn't really have and I had to work really hard to find. Um, you know, not everyone has easy access to that quite yet.
For sure. And yeah, this actually segues nicely into my last question, actually. So, why do you think this program is important, and why did you want to become a part of this program?
So there's a quote that's like, if you don't see it, you can't be it. And also, be who you needed when you were younger. So those are two things that have really resonated with me in situations like this, is like, even going back to high school, like I idolized male basketball players and their behaviors and how they handled things, because there was no females to look up to. Like, yeah, the WNBA existed, but in a small town, and like even at that time where social media wasn't as prevalent, you didn't see those things. The WNBA wasn't on TV. So I didn't get to find a female role model. It was really just limited to who I saw on TV and who was in the media and easily accessible. And it would have made such a difference for me if I had someone to reach out to and talk to, even going through like the Team Alberta process and the Team Canada tryouts. I really struggled because I had never been through a trial process really, and I didn't know what that felt like, and it was really, really, really tough, and it was really scary. And if I would have just had someone that I felt like had my back and I could trust, that I could be like, hey, what did you do in this situation? Like, how did you handle that? I think it would have made a world of a difference. And I even think sometimes now, like, I still am like missing those mentors sometimes from my point, like where I'm at in my career and in my playing career and in my like work career, is like, who can I reach out to that can like help me through these pieces? So I think, starting a mentorship program where like I'm able to mentor young girls now, it's like, okay, well, I'll always be there. So whether they're like 13, 14, 15, 18, and then like 10 years from now, they're 30 and they're in the position that I'm in, that I'll still be there to be able to mentor them. And I think the younger that you can start that, the more positive it can be. And, you know, the sports world is very, I think there's a big transition happening within it in a couple different ways. One of those being a little bit more, you know, focusing on being more equitable and offering more opportunities and putting more focus on getting girls into sport. Because it's not that girls don't want to play, it's that we're not creating the spaces for them to play. So to just be able to give back to the girls themselves, or the groups, or the communities, or the teams, to be able to show them how to create that space in order to draw more girls in and be that like cheerleader and that support person. I think just that's what's truly going to move things forward. You can't just open up space and like hope for the best. You have to, there's a lot of barriers that girls have to go through in order to make that decision to show up.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Tanya, so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Your story is very inspiring, and I hope that it can reach girls to connect with you, to provide that support for them, so that we can get more girls in football. That would be very exciting. It's a sport that I'm familiar with just through my brothers and my father, but it would be awesome to be familiar with through other women as well too, such as yourself. So thank you so much, and I'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you very much.